Hello, welcome back to the ERG resource sessions. I love hosting these conversations. I love sharing what I'm finding and the insights I'm gathering from ERG leaders, organizational leaders, and HR and talent leaders as well. So, welcome back. My name is Ola Demo, and I am the founder of EQI Mindset. EQI Mindset is from equity and inclusion mindset, and I work with organizations to build inclusive communities within their workplace. It's all about breaking barriers and creating an environment where employees from different diversity intersections feel included and find belonging. So, whatever the name you choose to call it at your organizations, ERGs, BRGs, affinity groups, colleague resource group, employee networks, how are you breaking the barriers within the workplace and creating safe, inclusive communities that need to exist before you can begin to tap into innovative feedback from your employees from different diversity backgrounds? So, thank you for joining. Today, I want to share a little bit about share or demystify some of the myths around ERGs and employee networks within companies. So, I'm really going to talk about 5 different things that I hear that are sort of resistant that organizations have around DEI. So, the first one is ERGs are social clubs. So, this is, I know where this comes from, and I know the perception also comes from how the organization that you are in set it up. But ERGs are way beyond social clubs. Now, there is a social aspect of the work that ERG members do, and that's still important. But ERGs are inclusive spaces that have gone beyond that. These are employees that show up at work anyway. They are employed by the organization, but they are going above and beyond what they are hired to do in order to create an inclusive workplace for members of the groups they represent. So they are more than social clubs. There's a social aspect. If your organization is in that spot where there's a lot of social disconnect, then you definitely need that social aspect. And actually, I encourage ERGs to make sure that they're making space for that. ERGs are not just in existence purely to make more money for the company. So, no, that's the other extreme of this conversation of this belief system. ERGs are not in existence to make money, more money for the company, and ERGs are not in existence just as social clubs. There is that midpoint where ERGs are able to bring value to the members of the group, because that is still important. You want to make sure that the employees that are volunteering, even for organizations that are paying, it takes a lot more than the people that are being paid or the beyond the amount that they are being paid to account for the time that ERG leaders invest in finding programs, planning the programs, and then getting feedback, putting all of that feedback together again for the organization, right? So ERG leaders are passion driven, and they have created these spaces where, yes, there is a social aspect of making sure that the members of the groups that we represent find belonging in our organization. But when that happens, it naturally triggers innovative initiatives and products, and the impact will affect the company bottom line, because these are people that you already have on board. So a lot more to unpack around that, but if you have specific questions, I will be diving into that when we have our monthly All Things ERG calls, which happens every first Friday at 10 a.m. PST. I will drop the link in the comment, and you can also share questions that you're having as we go along. So ERGs are beyond social clubs, but they also build that social community and support system for members of the group. The next one is that ERG are HR led. So this is also a very tricky one. So ERGs are not established to be something, another initiative, another department, another function that HR manages. So it's not the function, it's the leadership impact, and the company support is important. So ERGs are employee driven, company supported. Now that company support can come in different forms. It can come in form of HR liaison within the organization that supports the ERGs. It can come in form of the structures that the organization have. Most organizations have DEI as a department sitting somewhere, depending on how the organization is structured. So if the ERG support and connecting point is DEI that sits within HR, then there could be that perception that ERGs are HR led. But I actually get asked that question by companies trying to launch ERGs is, should I have my HR leader attend the ERG meetings? And I always say no. If an HR leader is showing up for every ERG meeting and saying, I just want to observe, it sends a different kind of message. So ERG are employee led, and they need that space to be creative, to be able to communicate, to be able to be innovative. And sometimes having an HR person attend all the meetings is not creating that space. Now, there are some members of ERG, some leads, some active members who work in HR, and that's very different. So HR leaders, of course, are included in the conversation, right? If you're part of that group, you're an HR manager, you work under the HR function, attending in that capacity as a member of the ERG is very different. So being present in that space to also benefit and support the group and be part of that conversation, always highly encouraged. But for the company to assign ERG HR partners or HR leaders, not very encouraging. I will say some of that does happen, and it could be a barrier to the ERG progress. It could also be a support mechanism. So depending on how the culture at the organization is, where does HR sit? But ERGs are not established to be another function that sits under HR. They are employee-led and company supported. All right, the next one I was going to talk about is ERG leaders leave. So I think these is also a common sentiment among CEOs, CHROs, as they talk about strategic planning for the organizations and why invest so much. And then these employees who are being very visible get poached by other organizations. And I always say, whether you have people leading your ERGs or not, employees are free to leave. They are not bound to your organization. But what you want to think about is, what message are they taking away? I have companies that I've worked in years ago where people still talk to me about, I want to get hired for this company. What do you think? I mean, I don't have enough knowledge of the organization anymore because I'm not within the system. But people, your reputation, your brand, your message is still taken out by the ERG leaders. So worrying about ERG leaders leaving is not the issue. What you should be concerned about is, what message do my employees take away? What kind of branding and reputation do we have when people are connecting with my employees? Which is the way recruitment goes now. It's not just about looking up the company. A lot of people go on LinkedIn before they accept a role and find somebody that works within the organization just for a chat, because people know that the real feedback you can get is from the people working within the system. So investing in your ERG leaders is investing in your organization. And ERG leaders are going to grow. Part of volunteering to lead an ERG, you're going to develop new skills. They are going to get exposed to different part of the business. They are going to get different skill sets than what they were hired for. Now, how are you as an organization growing their skills internally instead of allowing them to grow out? So when I speak at HR talent conferences, the conversation is around, how can you engage, attract, retain your already engaged employees? Because ERG leaders, there's a different approach to how you are recruiting your ERG leaders. And a lot of times it's a missed opportunity by HR and talent, is you have people that are very engaged at your organization. If you are still going by the titles and you're not looking at actual skill set, it costs you way less to move somebody internally, um, even if you are moving them a couple of bands, if they have the experience, because they already know about your organization, and you don't have to, do a whole process of onboarding somebody new. So what do you have to work with? ERG leaders are engaged, passionate employees who are already demonstrating their commitment to your organization by going above and beyond their role expectation. How are you engaging them? How are you recruiting your ERG leaders into positions within your organization, whether or not it cuts across bands or function, right? So ERG leaders leave. Yes, if you are not attracting them in, they are going to grow out of your organization. So develop strategies around hiring, retaining, transitioning ERG leaders so they have a growth path even beyond leading the ERGs. And also understanding that not all ERG leaders want to move to DEI. And I think that's another mistake around ERG leaders leaving. A large percentage of ERG leaders actually love the day job that they have and they want to stay there. So when they are thinking of growth path, they are not thinking of the ERG as a growth path. And that's because the connection is not being made by your organization. That growth path is tied to a lot of skills that the ERG leaders are acquiring that could also be transferred to their department job, to their day job. So managers have a huge role to play here, to make sure that ERG leaders are growing inwards and not outwards. Another myth is around ERGs and their role in the organization. So I have a lot of conversations with ERG teams, ERG leaders, and I think there is also a growth path for your ERGs. So there are companies that say we want to start ERGs, and there's the organic efforts to engage and activate employees. And then there are organizations that are early on their DEI journey and early on their ERG journey. So you just launched ERGs, you have new leaders, it's a year or 2 or 3 in. And there are also organizations that have had ERGs for years. And one of the things that I've also seen over the last couple of years is that this does not necessarily correlate to the DEI journey of the organization. And what I mean by that is a lot of organizations started ERG, started employee groups, started affinity groups way before they ever started having conversations around what is our DEI strategy as an organization. So, so when you're working with ERGs, the positioning is also important. ERGs are that blend of DEI, employee engagement, learning and development, and these are different CSR, corporate social responsibilities. So these are different areas that ERGs are touching. But how you position your ERG is very important. ERGs can be a huge part of your DEI strategy, but that can happen in different ways. And I think this myth, this perception is also critical now as we talk about terminologies. Because what really is DEI? DEI is a broad initiative that should be touching every aspect of your organization. So we're talking end-to-end supply chain, manufacturing, delivery, customer-facing roles, right? Across the board. Diversity, equity, inclusion involves breaking all of those barriers to make sure that all of our processes are inclusive. Now, we use the term DEI, and the origin of the intent of using that word when we describe initiatives is to say you as an organization should be thinking about ways to build inclusion, to bring different perspective, right? Looking for opportunities to make a change, to make your workplace more inclusive all through the journey, all through your process at the organization. So when you think about DEI, that's a very broad pocket. And if you think about DEI leaders, part of the challenge that chief diversity officers or DEI leaders are facing is that having to, cut through so many hoops to get anything done, creating a DEI role and hiring somebody in that role with very few team members in an organization that is very diverse. And I'm not even talking about like ethnic or gender diversity. I'm talking about functional and business diversity and cross-country locations, right? So if you think about ERGs are not your DEI, this myth is really around the role, overburdening the ERG leaders with what they are responsible for at your organization. The ERG leaders are not responsible for fixing DEI at your company. ERG leaders should be accelerators and activators for what you at the organizational leadership level have built and have created. But ERGs need that support, they need that guidance, they need that vision so that they are speeding things up for you, not having to create the strategies from scratch. Because ERG groups are micro groups, right? So they don't have a big enough picture at the company level. There are groups for individuals, groups for employees within different life phases. So if you think about it, if there's nothing at the top guiding them, is why ERGs frizzle out, is why there's burnout, is where there's frustration. Because there's that, what exactly am I trying to do? Am I really making a difference? And then people get discouraged and they leave. So as an organization, if you are in the C-suite, if you are the CEO, all of the cabinet members, everyone should still be working on addressing inclusion, diversity, belonging issues at that level. And then the ERGs are part of your DEI strategy. They are like an extended arms to help activate some of the initiatives that you've put in place, some of the strategies that you have, right? And that's why ERGs are sort of that blend of the two. Leaders are driving it, are supporting it. Employees have to also raise up their hand and be willing to do the work. And then the last one is ERGs are for minority groups. And this is also tied to the origin of ERGs. ERGs started from Xerox as Black affinity groups. And so that perception that the two largest, most common ERGs are Black ERGs and women ERGs. And if you think about the evolution of DEI, of groups within the workplace, right? We're talking about creating spaces for Black people, and then we're talking about affirmative action and all of the legal requirements around gender inclusion, right? So these two groups kind of came up to the surface of ERG initiatives as this is the groups that we should focus on. It has to be something around BIPOC or Black ERGs or women ERG. And then we started to see increasing adoption for LGBTQ ERGs, and then different breakdown of BIPOC ERGs, right? Now we're seeing people starting ERGs around Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, right? And there's that perception that so ERGs are for minority groups. Again, ERGs are beyond that, not just minority groups. And actually, companies are now realizing the value of establishing the groups not around even that branding or that name, right? But around the mission and the impact and the purpose. And even for organizations that have the groups created, centering minority groups, right? Centering the Black employee, centering the female experience, centering the LGBTQ experience, right? The goal is not for you as an organization to position these groups as exclusive spaces for members of these communities. The goal is to leverage these groups as a resource, as a feedback loop, so that you are aware of some of the challenges that these groups are facing, and then continue to build that feedback into your policies and systems. So I think that by itself, having that understanding of the reason why we need to have some ERGs based on minority groups is also a way to drive in the message that the membership and the support that this group needs is from everybody, right? A lot of ERGs are established based on minority groups, underrepresented groups. And I also use the word unheard groups. Because, for example, if you think about parents and caregivers, um, not necessarily a minority group in a lot of workplaces, right? But are they being heard? Do you know their needs? And are you making changes in your policies and within your systems to make sure that they are heard? So, minority, unheard, marginalized groups, if you choose to start your ERG under any of these buckets, it should be open to all. So, anyone who does not necessarily identify with these groups, who is not a visible part of this group, because sometimes these are also invisible, right? Can still feel like I can be a very active part of this. I can be an ally. I can be a listener. Like there's so much I can do. I still really resonate with the mission of this group and I want to be a part of it. So, however, the groups are set up, that understanding, that clarity around who should be in there. Now, with programming, ERGs have found ways to also create brave and safe spaces. So it's not just for members of minority groups, but there are certain groups that have needs to have programming that is just focused on their group members, right? There are certain ways that ERGs can craft programs where this is a safe space because the conversations we want to have is for healing, is for addressing, we want people to be open, we want people to be comfortable. So who is invited to that? We have to be very careful. And then when we talk about brave spaces, there are certain programs that are created for people that are not part of that group to come in and listen and ask questions and learn and be educated. So there is the education part of the ERG role, and there is the safety and the belonging. So I hope this has been helpful. So when you think about ERG mates, ERGs beyond social clubs, ERGs are not HR led, but can be HR supported. ERG leaders are growing. So growing within your organizations means you as an organizational leader need to develop strategies to retain the members within your organization, or they will grow out of the organization. And then the fourth one, ERGs are your DEI. ERGs can be a huge asset to your DEI strategy. And even if you are at the very early stages of your DEI strategy, ERGs can be a huge resource to make sure that you're thinking about this right. And then ERGs are for minority groups. No, ERGs for everyone. And the focus on amplifying the issues for different groups is where that differentiator is. But ERGs should be set up so that everyone is invited, everyone is welcome, everyone has a space in there. We're not creating another set of exclusive groups within the workplace, and then leaving room for growth, right? Leaving room that ERGs are a different part of the journey. So if you are just launching, how are you listening before you launch? What groups should you start? If you have already established the groups, giving the ERGs that moment, that time to create belonging places, to also, as ERG leaders, leverage the group for their own safety and just inclusion before they begin to have that active initiative launch growth part ahead of them. So if your ERGs are earlier on, the kind of resources and tools that you would provide might be a little different for ERGs that are more advanced. They might be more aligned with business strategies at that point, but you have to be ready for that. You can't force it because ERG still needs to be driven by your employees, what they want. And your role as a leader isn't to make the employees feel belonging the way you choose to tell them to. Your role is to build trust, is to continue to nurture your culture or improve your culture, depending on where you sit, and making sure that as the leaders provide the feedback, as the ERG members provide the feedback, we are incorporating it, we are revising, and then we are growing and learning as an organization, building an inclusive workplace. So I hope that has been helpful. If you have any questions, drop in the comment. I'm going to be responding to questions in the comment. And I look forward to seeing you for the next All Things ERG monthly call every first Friday on Zoom.